Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to becomeatechpro.com. In today's session, we want to look at Linux. And these are the areas we'll be covering. Why learn Linux? What are required to set up a Linux environment? Tools needed for managing and accessing resources on the Linux server. About Linux, we'll look at some history, we'll look at some features, we'll look at the difference between licensed and free and open source, okay? We'll also look at different Linux distributions, which can also be referred to as distros. Then we'll look at text editors, right? And we'll look at what you might be familiar with using Windows. We also look at what you need to use when you are working with Linux, okay? We'll also look at the different types of users in Linux. And aside that, we'll also look at the Linux directory structure, okay? The Linux directory structure. Okay, so these are the areas we'll be covering today. So we'll start with the first one, why learn Linux? Okay, so in the first place, we need to know what Linux is, okay? Linux is an open source operating system, okay? So just as we have Windows that comes with that you have on your regular computer, most people have Windows, some Mac OS, right? So Linux is an operating system. So why learn Linux? Why not stick to the other operating systems? We'll get to see why as we proceed, okay? So why learn Linux? Okay? Number one reason is because it is popular, okay? We're looking at the popularity of Linux, right? So Linux is widely used for servers. So different organizations, especially those in cloud computing, they also use Linux. And many other applications also are integrated with Linux. Okay, so because of the popularity, we need to know Linux, right? Because that is what most people are using, most organizations, okay? So there's need for us to understand Linux, right? So that is why we are learning Linux, okay? Also, knowing Linux can also increase job opportunities and marketability, okay? So we shouldn't just be restricted to the regular Windows or Mac OS that we are familiar with using, okay? We need to use Linux because that is what most organizations use, and we need to also follow along, okay? So another reason is the fact that it's customizable, okay? Okay, so let's say customizability. So this is another important reason why we learn Linux, okay? It's highly customizable. So when I say it's customizable, okay, we need to try to understand what that means, okay? So Linux, if you remember, when I was defining it, I regarded this as an open source operating system. We'll be using this term open source as much as possible. So we need to understand what open source means, okay? So when you have an open source application, it means the application can be modified and can be distributed to people as you want it, right? So that is open source, okay? So when it is open source, we are looking at it as customizable, okay? So because open source is an open source, because Linux is an open source applications operating system, you can modify it to meet your specific needs. Okay, so customizability is another reason why we learn open source. Okay, another reason why it is very important is because of security. Okay, security. Security is another reason why we consider learning Linux. Okay, just security. Okay, when it comes to security, we are looking at Linux because of its stability and security features. Okay, so organizations put security at forefront. Okay, so most organizations use Linux because of the security features. So you need to learn Linux so that you can also understand how it is used so that you can be highly marketable. Okay, another reason is cost. Okay, considering the fact that it's open source, okay, it's free and also open source, meaning there is no license fee or vendor locking you in as you have with Windows, right? So that makes it a popular choice because organizations always have budgets, right? They want anything to help them reduce their costs, okay? So if Linux is open source and it's serving the purpose, it's customizable, it's popular, it has security features, and it's also not expensive, right? So it means organizations will use it. And when organizations use it, right, it means you need to learn it so that you can be highly marketable. That is why we are learning Linux, okay? So another reason why we learn Linux is because of the versatility, okay? With Linux, you can do several tasks, right? Several tasks with Linux, right? So we look at the versatility is another reason why you learn Linux, right? Because with Linux, you can carry out several tasks using Linux, okay? Then another reason is the multi-user capability, okay? Multi-user capability. So when I say multi-user capability, I'm looking at the ability of the operating system for you to have different users working with the operating system. So what it means is that within an organization, you can have Lagbaja, you can have Tamedun, right? You can have Obesere, you can have whoever, right? On the same operating system. We'll get to understand how this is because once we get our hands on, we'll see how to create users, how to limit access of users, how users can, create. We look at different types of users, right? So multi-user capability is another reason why Linux is popular and why we are learning Linux, right? So that we can also be highly marketable. Okay, so now configure is also used because the program we are learning is DevOps, right? DevOps made easy, right? So from the introductory class, we've seen what DevOps is, right? And we've seen that we require several tools to work with DevOps, okay? So now, all these tools, most of them, right? Because Linux is popular, they've also been created to be compatible with the Linux operating system, okay? So the configuration of DevOps tools, configuration of DevOps tools. Okay, or we can say because of the capability to configure DevOps tools, right? Because this is like a key reason why we are learning DevOps. Right? Not looking at it from the general point of view, but looking at it from the point of view of our objective, right? Our objective is to become DevOps professionals, right? And we need to use tools, right, in line with the DevOps culture. And we know that because because Linux is popular, it is also capable of configuring DevOps tools. So we need to use Linux and we need to learn Linux. Okay. Okay, we need to learn Linux. Capability to configure DevOps tools. Okay. Capability to configure DevOps tools. Okay, so this is another reason why we are learning Linux. Okay, that's another reason why we are learning Linux. Okay, so on the overall, learning Linux will help us improve our technical skills. And the truth is, no knowledge is a waste, right? So once you know this, you start to expand your capacity, right? You get to understand so many things you can do, okay? So with DevOps, okay, since we are looking at DevOps tools, right? Or we can also say configure, it enhances automation, okay? This is another point. Automation, okay? Because with this, we can set up different things we want to set up, like we'll also go into shell scripting, right? We can look at we'll look at shell scripting as we proceed in this program, okay? So we'll see how it enhances automation, okay? So the next thing we are going to look at is what are required to set up a Linux environment. What are required to set up a Linux environment. So the way it is for you to have Linux environment set up, okay? The first thing you need to have is your computer, right? You need a computer, okay? So what are required? You need a computer, and you need a Linux distribution. We'll look at what Linux distribution means, okay? And the Linux distribution, okay? So these are the basic things you need to set up a Linux environment. You need a computer and you need a Linux distribution, okay? Now, when you are looking at this, okay? When you are looking at this, most of the work we'll be working on, okay? We'll be using the virtual machine, okay? We have the computer, quite all right, okay? So aside this, okay, since we are working with cloud-based infrastructure, right? Because cloud is where we'll be working most of the times, because that is where almost all organizations are moving, right? Because nobody wants to keep big servers in an office and powering the space just because you want to use an infrastructure, right? Most people are approaching cloud service providers like AWS, Google Cloud Platform, Azure, and the rest of them, right? Oracle and the rest of them, to provide them with cloud services, okay? So because that is the trend, so we are also structuring what we are learning towards that, okay? So that we are prepared for it, right? Gone are those days when organizations will keep servers, have server room with several of computers and all of that set up and configured, okay? So people are using cloud infrastructure to reduce cost. Okay, we are going to look at AWS in details, right, so that we can understand how this cloud infrastructure works and all of that. So apart from that, apart from this, in our own case, we also require a virtual machine. Okay, which should be maybe, depending on the platform we choose, maybe AWS or it could be GCP. Okay, in this case, we have EC2 instances. Okay, EC2 instances. Okay, right? We'll get to see it, right? It could be VM, virtual machine. Okay, so depending on the platform we are working with. Okay, so now we've seen what we require: a computer, virtual machine, and Linux distribution. Okay, so these are the things we require, but I'm sure we all have this already. That's what we are connecting to, right? To the class suite. Okay, so we'll look at how we can set up a virtual machine and have a Linux distribution in it. Okay, so we can select the Linux distribution we want. Okay, so as much as possible, we'll also look at what Linux distribution means. Okay, so now that we are done with this, let's look at something else very important. But before this, so that it doesn't get boring, okay, I think this is a good time to actually set up a virtual machine so that we can actually see how this works, okay? So looking at the different platforms, so we'll be working with AWS, right? That's Amazon Web Services, right? So we can set up a virtual machine on Amazon Web Services. That way we can have this and this, right? And we can get hands-on and really move forward. Okay, so now what we want to do, let's go to our browser, AWS, okay? AWS, right? You can just go on Google and search, just search AWS, okay? Can do this, okay? You see Amazon Web Services, okay? So this is the website, aws.amazon.com, okay? So this is AWS, right? This is AWS. So right here, we can create an account, okay? So there are other platforms as well, okay? There's Azure, there's GCP. Azure is by Microsoft, okay? AWS is by Amazon, Azure is by Microsoft, and GCP, Google Cloud Platform, is by Google, okay? So I think at this point, we should create a Linux server, okay? So what we want to do, the first thing we want to do, right? Because this is about the first time we are doing this, okay? So what we want to do is to create an account with AWS, okay? So to create an account with AWS, you can see the different stuff you have, right? Different tabs, okay? So if you click on here, sign in, okay? Because I already have an account, okay? I already have an account set up here. So what I want to do is to log out, okay? So I log out, let me sign out of here. Okay, let's sign out and log back in. Don't to. Okay, I think it's picking my, okay, this fine. So right now, what we have here, we can see we have our sign-in area, right? And we also see that there's an opportunity for us to create a new account, okay? So I can go ahead to create a new account. I don't want to use the existing account I have here because I want us to be able to see how to do this from the scratch, right? I create a new account. You can see, says sign up for AWS. Let me increase the size. You can see sign up for AWS. Tells me to enter my username, user email address, okay? So I've created an email address specifically for this, okay? You don't have to do that. You can use your existing email. The reason why I did this is so that I can have a brand new account created and show how it's done, right? February 2023 DevOps class at gmail.com. Okay, so this is the email account I created. Okay, so I can click on this. Okay, it's prompting me to enter a name, right? I can put a name. Okay, can put a name. Then I've clicked on verify email address. Okay, so you can see an email has been sent to me. So what I want to do now is to go check my email address for a verification code that was sent. Let me refresh the mail. So I have an email sent to the email address I set up there, okay? So the email says I should verify, right? I have 10 minutes to do this. It's only valid for 10 minutes. So put in the code. Okay, so that's the code that I have. So I click on verify. In case you do not get the verification code, you can always click resend code, okay? So I click on verify. So it's you. Your email has been successfully verified. So now it's prompting me to create a password, right? So I can create a password and just add an existing password. Right? I have the password. So this is step 1 of 5, okay? So continue. So the next step, right, is you can see you have options. How do you plan to use this for personal, right? And click on this. Okay, so it's telling me about the free tier offers. All AWS accounts can explore 3 different types of free offers depending on the product used. Always free, 12 months free, starts from the initial starting of date, and trials. Okay, so now what we are setting up, right, will give us access to 12 months free, right? But not on all services, okay? When we are creating instances, as much as possible for a start, we'll be creating instances that are T2.micro. But as time goes on, based on the tools we want to work with, right? For example, if you want to work with Jenkins, you require a 4 gig RAM, okay? So it means the T2.micro instance will no longer work, okay? So for that kind of service, okay, we will require something higher than T2.micro, but that is obviously not free, okay? So we'll go ahead and click on this, like set up a name, okay? I want to put in our name. Okay, created a name. I've added a name, I want to put in a phone number. Let's put in a phone number. Okay, I want to put in a number, another. Okay, so let me put in this phone number. Okay, so that's a phone number I've put there. Okay, so country or region. Okay, I put this in. Okay, so what else? Address, transfer address. Right, transfer address, put in my address. Right, put in my address. Right, so then I click on, you're supposed to read the agreement, right? So I'm assuming I've read it. So I click to go to the next step. Okay, so at this point, it's asking for billing information. Okay, so this billing information is required to be entered so that when it's time for you to get charged, you can your account will get charged. Okay, but most of the services you'll be using for now will be free, right? But as time goes on, when we need to make payments, okay, we'll go through in the course of the program, we'll see how you can manage the payment process so that the amounts you'll be billed will not be so high and how you can use these servers. Okay, so putting in the payment information is not is not an issue. Okay, so I want to put in the payment information, but let me just take this. So what I'll need to put in, I'll put in this, I'll put in these details and cardholder's name, okay? Then I'll return, okay? I'll return to the screen. You can see this is step 3 of 5, right? So I can take this away for now. Okay, so once I'm done with that page, I'll return it, okay? Okay. So expiration date. Okay. So verify and continue step. Okay. So now, okay. So now we are here. So it's saying my identity needs verification. So all I did was enter my card details and clicked on next. So now it wants me to verify my identity. Okay. So I can either use text message, okay, or voice call. Okay. So to confirm identity, not sure why it's asking for my phone number again when I've already provided it, but I can always do that. Okay, so security check. What's that character? Okay, so send SMS. Okay, so a code should have been sent to my phone. Okay, so checking my phone now, I see a code, the verification code to confirm my identity. Okay, Now you can see different options, right? So obviously we are going for the basic because the basic one will help us achieve everything we want to achieve, okay? We can do everything we want to do, right? For throughout the course of the program using this, okay? So can select that by default. You can see what it is. So for developer support, right? Recommended for developers experimenting with AWS, email access to AWS support during business hours, 12 business hour response times, So these are like for priority service, right? But we don't need that. Okay, so we'll just go ahead, select this and complete sign up. Okay, so this way we'll be using AWS for free. Okay, some resources here that are absolutely free. Okay, but some are paid and some have certain limits. Okay, so as we continue to the program, with the program, we'll get to understand which one is which. Okay, so congratulations, thank you for signing up for AWS. Okay, reactivating your account, which should take a few minutes. You receive an email. Okay, that's fine. So we can now click on this AWS Management Console. Now we have an account. Okay, so we can now put in the email address, February 2023 DevOps class at gmail.com. Okay, so this is for our class, right? So I am, okay, root user. So we'll get to see what I am user is in the course of the program when we are learning AWS, right? So there's a topic in AWS called IAM, right? Identity and access management. IAM, okay? Identity and access management, okay? So we'll get to know how to use all of this as we proceed, okay? So let's just go ahead and click on next. So my password, I know my password. Okay, so we are in, okay? So we are in, okay? This is AWS account, okay? So we are in. Okay, let's see. You can see. Okay. You can see instances running 0. Okay. Security group 1. Okay. We'll get to learn about all of these things as we proceed in the program. Okay. So now we have an AWS account, which is the first condition. Well, we've met it, the necessary condition. Okay. So now, do we have a server yet? No, we don't. Okay. So what we just have now is an AWS account. However, to the requirements, if you remember our requirements, let's expand this a bit. Okay. If you remember our requirements was we need a virtual machine. Okay. We need a virtual machine. That is our requirement, a virtual machine. Okay. So since we are working with AWS, we'll be looking at getting EC2 instances, okay? That will be our virtual machine, okay? So in AWS, it is regarded to as EC2 instances, okay? So EC2 instances. So that's Elastic Compute Cloud, okay? That's what EC2 means, okay? Elastic Compute Cloud. Okay, EC2. You can see virtual servers in the cloud. Okay, virtual servers in the cloud. Elastic computer in the cloud. Elastic compute cloud actually. EC2. C2. Okay, EC2, right? Yes, you can see Elastic compute cloud. Okay, so to remember, you can say, oh, Elastic computer in the cloud, right? So that's a good way to remember because usually you might mistake it and say, oh, Elastic Cloud Compute, right? but it's Elastic Compute Cloud, Elastic Computer in the cloud. Okay? That's a good way to remember it. Okay, so that's just by the way. Okay, so now that we have this, okay, so we want to get an Elastic Compute Cloud, okay, an EC2 instance, right? So there are several products we'll be looking at, right, as we proceed, but don't get overwhelmed by everything you see here. We'll be picking it one at a time, okay? We've not got to cloud. We just want to pick something that we need from here, right? That's why we went through this process, okay? So we are trying to learn Linux, but we need to have a virtual machine to be able to set up a Linux server, okay? So now, once a virtual machine, you can see we can launch an instance, okay? You can click here to launch an instance. Look at it, launch an instance. Okay, so we'll go ahead and click that, launch an instance. Then this comes at the bottom, right? Then you click on it, right? So it takes you to this environment, okay? So we'll take it one step at a time, okay? One step at a time. So now what we want to do is to look at this, name and tags, okay? What do we want to call this server, right? We can just call it our Linux server. You can call it any name you like, okay? You can call it any name you like. But for me, I want to just call it my Linux server, okay? Now, when you have this setup, okay, if you go through, okay, you see that we have several names, right? You can see several names here. So these are Linux distributions, okay? So it's like we are getting a virtual machine and we are ordering a virtual machine and we are selecting the Linux distribution to put in it, right? You can see different Linux distributions. You can see we have different, we also even have Microsoft here. We have uh, Microsoft Windows here. You have Mac OS, right? See, we have different Linux distributions. This is a Linux distribution. Ubuntu is a Linux distribution. Red Hat is a Linux distribution, right? You can see SUSE Linux is a Linux distribution. Debian is a Linux distribution, okay? So we'll get to look at all of these in details as we proceed, okay? But I want to just go ahead and choose Red Hat Linux distribution, okay? Red Hat as Linux distribution. You can see what I've done so far, right? I clicked launch an instance. It brought me to this environment, right? I came here, up here, I ensure that it's on one, right? Number of instances I want, right? Because you can create more than one instance, right? But we just want one, right? We want just one, okay? So I want just one, just ensure it's set at one, okay? Then I came here and gave it a name. What name do you want to call it? It could be Linux server, it could be Linux underscore server, it could be Linux server like this, anyhow you want to write it, right? So you can have that as a tag, okay? So we'll get to see how to use additional tags. Maybe you want to create a different tag. Maybe you are creating this Linux server for a different purpose, but we do not need that. So in that case, we need to click on this, okay? So, but it's just fine. We've given it a name, okay? So the next thing we are going to do is to scroll down gently and choose a Linux distribution. I've chosen Red Hat. We'll get to see other kinds of distributions, right? Linux distributions or distros, as they call it, okay? Linux distribution. So I chose Red Hat, okay? So the next thing I want to do is to scroll down. You can see this set as free tier eligible, okay? Which is fine, okay? Leave this as it is, you can see. Then I scroll down. By default, it is on T2.micro, which is eligible for free tier, right? You can see it's free tier eligible, okay? If you use this drop down, you see others, right? You can see T2 small is not free tier eligible, right? T2 medium, right? Which is 4 gig RAM, is not free tier eligible. You can see when we were opening the account, we saw free tier, right? For 12 months or something, right? So what it means is that with this, you can maintain just one T2.micro instance, right? for a full month without getting billed. But if you start to create multiple T2.micros and you leave them running, right? You have 5 T2.micros, right? And you leave them running, definitely you get charged, okay? You get charged. But in this case, we won't get charged if we manage it well, okay? Even though it's free tier eligible, if you maintain more than one at the same time and you don't shut it down for any reason, you just leave it on, maybe it's free. You just realize that the free tier eligible is only limited to 750 hours in a month, right? That's correct. Okay. Yeah, so that is T2.micro. Okay, so it's set at free tier eligible, so we are fine. Okay, I just wanted to show you the different options we have. Okay, so come down here, instance type, you can see that's what we set it as, T2.micro. Now, key pair login, right? You can see you are right there at your different locations. You can see I've created an account, I've set up a Linux server, right? So for me to be able to access this server, right, I need a key, okay? Because you realize that right here, I'm somewhere in Canada and I'm creating a Linux server in Ohio, right? We'll get to learn about all of these locations, right? We'll get to learn them when we are looking at AWS proper, right? I'm setting up a server somewhere in Ohio, US East, right? Ohio, right? So this is where I'm setting up this instance, right? So for me to be able to access my server, because the big servers, the big server that I would have had to maintain in this office space where I'm trying to do all of this, right? That big server is being maintained somewhere by AWS in Ohio, right? This data center is somewhere in that region. Ohio is a region, right? So the availability zone, right, where I am creating this is somewhere in Ohio, right? So now, to be able to access my account, several people will have accounts, servers in same Ohio. For me to be able to access mine, I need a key pair name, okay? So I need a key pair name. I don't have any for this class, right? So what I want to do is to create a new key pair, okay? So when I click on create new key pair, right? I leave it as what it is by default, rsa.pem, okay? So what I'll do here is to say, I want to give it a name, okay? So let me just put February 2023 DevOps class, okay? So this is my key name, okay? So February 2023 DevOps class, right? So this is the key name. So I click on create key pair. So what you'll notice is that this key pair has been downloaded on my computer, right? This key pair has been downloaded on my computer. So if I go to downloads, I'll find out that the key pair is already there, okay? The key pair is already there. If I go to downloads, let me go to downloads, right? So if you look at, this is my downloads, okay? You see February 2023 DevOps class .pem. You see, I didn't put .pem, right? So don't put .pem when you are creating it, okay? That is the extension that it comes with, okay? So you don't have to put .pem, just put February or whatever name you want to give your key pair, right? Without the .pem, you see that the .pem extension will come with it. You can see it tells you this is a PEM file, okay? So this PEM file is your key that you use to enter your Linux server, okay? So I can close this now, okay? We've seen that. So you can see, if I check the drop down now, I'll see February 2023 DevOps task. It is not impossible for you to have several key pairs, right? You can have 10 key pairs, right? So what it just means is that anytime we are creating a server, we should just know the key pair that you want to associate with that server, okay? Then you select, okay? If you don't have any, you can create, Or if you want something else, you can always create more, okay? So that is that. So one I want is this, right? I don't want to create any other one. So I'm proceeding, okay? Click on this and scroll down gently, okay? So we'll get to learn about VPC, subnets, all this IP and all of this terminology as we proceed in the program. It's not difficult, okay? It's not difficult. It's going to be easy all the way, okay? So you leave this as it is, okay? You can see by default, this is set as allow SSH traffic, okay? Okay, we'll get to understand why this is this and why we are not changing it. I'll get to show you as we proceed. Now see, I didn't do anything about this. I'm just scrolling down gently, okay? So by default, this is the storage, okay? We'll also learn about this as we proceed in the program, how to create all of this, all these volumes and all of this, okay? So you can add a new volume and all of this. We don't need this for now, right? But it's easy, right? Because the way I want you to see it is that all these other components, right, that we are still going to learn, at the end of the day, they have something to do with what we are learning at the moment, okay? So nothing is difficult. So we scroll down, we'll see why this is this by default, okay? For some others, it will be maybe 8 gig, right? But this is 10 gig, okay? So we just go with default and we do nothing else and just click on launch instance. But before then, we just check that this is just one, okay? So we don't have multiple instances that we don't need, okay? So click on launch instance. When you click on launch instance, right, we have launched our instance. If you click on either here or here, if you click on here, it takes you to this particular instance that we just launched, okay? You can click on here to view all instances, which fortunately we have just one, okay? You can click on this to take you directly to the instance. So anyhow you do it, here we are. So this is the new instance that we created. Is a t2.micro instance. And so this is the name we gave it. You can rename it if you feel you don't like the name right here. So you always have the option to rename, okay? So it shows it's now running, okay? So we'll come back to this, right? Anyway, we'll come back to this. So what we've been able to achieve is that we've been able to create a virtual machine. We also have a Linux distribution, right? The Linux distribution we have is the Red Hat, okay? We'll get to learn Linux distributions as we proceed just now, okay? So now we have our computer, right? We have a virtual machine, which is an EC2 instance, and we also have a Linux distribution, okay? So we've set up a Linux environment, right? So what else? So we want to look at the tools, right? You can see we've set up a Linux server, okay? Do I need to travel to Ohio to access my server and go to AWS data center and say, oh yes, I have some resources here I want to use? No, I can do this remotely, okay? I can do this right from where I am, right? I can access that server that we've created, okay? So I can access that server. So what tools do I need, okay? So there are certain tools that are needed for managing and accessing resources on the Linux server. So the first one is SSH client. Okay, we need an SSH client, okay? We also require, in the course of the work, you see why we need this FTP client, okay? FTP client, SSH client. Okay, so these are some of the resources, the tools we'll need, okay, to get things done. Okay, so now I want us to really have fun, right? Not just theoretical all the way. So as we are doing a little of talking theory, we are also getting our hands dirty, right? Okay, so when you say SSH, okay, SSH here is secure shell, okay? SSH is secure shell, okay? So SSH client is the tool we need to access SSH, right? Is the tool we need to access the Linux server, right? I'm in Canada, my server is in Ohio. I need to gain access to the server, okay? So SSH can be seen as a secure protocol for accessing remote systems, remote computers, right? And executing commands on them. We'll be executing commands, right? I'm here in Canada. My server is there in Ohio, right? I can access it, right, using SSH clients, okay? So some of the tools that we can use for that, okay? Some of the tools that we can use are, let's list some examples, okay? Examples, there's mobile hextem, right? There's Git bash. There's Git bash. There's PuTTY. There's Super PuTTY. We can also have PowerShell, right? We can also have PowerShell, right? We can have PowerShell, right? It's for Windows 11. Then if you are using a MacBook, right? So about terminal, item, right? It's item, there is item, okay? That's all. Mac OS, okay? So, right? So these are some SSH clients, okay? So with this, you can access your remote computer, right? Because that's your elastic computer in the cloud, right? Right? You can access your EC2 instance, right? Using all of these tools, okay? Now, for transferring, okay, for transferring files or resources from one location, for example, from my local computer to my computer in the cloud, okay? So there are tools, right, that we can use for that, okay? And we call those tools FTP clients, right? And FTP here means file transfer protocol. File transfer protocol. Call, okay? File transfer protocol, okay? Okay, so there are different file transfer protocols, okay? FTP clients that can be used, okay? You can use FileZilla. You can use FileZilla. You can use CyberDoc, okay? FileZilla, you can use CyberDoc. You can even use WinSCP for Windows, right? WinSCP for Windows, okay? WinSCP for Windows, okay? So now, these are some file transfer protocol clients, okay? You want to transfer a file from your local computer to your computer in the cloud, right? So how do they connect? You can't copy and paste, right? Because of the way the platform is, which we'll get to see now, okay? But you can use FTP clients, okay? But usually for me, I like to use my SCP command, okay? There's a command, I use my Linux command, SCP command, okay? Instead of using FTP client, I can just use my SCP command. We'll get to see how these commands work. Commands can be used. Okay, so we'll get to see how this command can be used. See, Linux is not difficult, okay? So sometimes you see the command, you say, oh, CP command. CP just means copy, right? CP, copy, okay? SCP means secure copy, okay? So I use the secure copy commands, okay? And you don't need to memorize anything, I'll tell you this, okay? The way this program is structured is such that we have quizzes, we have flashcards, we have all of these resources that we provide so that as you are trying your hands on these things, right? And there are also projects, right, that you do on your own, right? Like setting up the servers and doing all of these things on your own. And all these actions, all these activities will help you remember all these things, right? Without having to try to memorize it on your own, right? So, and the good thing about this program is that you can always access all of these resources on the internet, right? You can go to Google, but you just need to know what you are doing, right? You just need to know what you are doing. There are several platforms on the internet that you can go to ask questions. So what is most important is understanding the concepts, okay? So now we have all of this, okay? So think about now, let's look at, let's see, talk a little bit about history, or alternatively, let's see, since we are just here, we just looked at this, okay? So Mobile XTEM is a secure shell client, SSH client, okay? Git Bash is also another SSH client, okay? So for the purpose of this class, I'll be using Git Bash and Mobile XTEM, okay? So Git Bash, Mobile XTEM most of the times, and Git Bash once in a while, and you also get to see why we are using it, okay? So if you are using macOS, you can just use this, right? This has been okay, this should come with macOS, right? This should already come with macOS, right? But for me, I'm using Windows, so I'll be installing this too, okay? I'll show you how to install this, okay? So there are two things we've done so far, right? Getting our hands dirty with creating an account on AWS. We've also gone ahead to set up a Linux server, okay? So the next thing we want to do is to create this secure shell client, because we want to do something. We want to access that server that we just created, but we can't access it, right? So the next thing we want to do is to set them up, okay? So for me, I have it, but I don't want to, I don't want to use this because I want to be able to show how to set it up, right? So I have Mobile XTEM already. So what I want to do is to uninstall it. Okay. So to uninstall, right? I typed Mobile XTEM, it came up. I right click this, then I click on uninstall. Okay. So it opens up something for me. Okay. On the other, so it opens this up. Okay. Uninstall. Then what was the program? That's Mobile XTEM. I click on it, okay. And click on install, right? You see, I clicked on it here, and up here, I clicked on install. Now it's asking me whether I'm sure I want to uninstall. I've never been sure. Okay, so uninstall. Okay, so let's see. Okay, so let me take this out of the way. Okay, so it shows that it's currently uninstalling. So the other one I want to look at is the git bash. Okay, so I want to come here. Let's search for git bash. Okay, so git bash. Okay, so this is what the git bash platform looks like. Okay, so this is the git bash. Okay, this is the git bash. So by default, the git bash is mirroring my local computer, right? My computer. So you can see all of these are in my computer, right? In my computer. So that's what git bash is accessing. So you can see all of these are in my computer, right? So let me just close this. I don't want to use this. I want to install it afresh, right? So MobileXTEM is currently being uninstalled. Okay, so let's uninstall git bash as well. So if I come here, I can right click and click uninstall. Okay, so it opens this up, git bash. Let's bring this over. Okay, so it opens this up. So while I'm here, I'll check for git bash here. Git, okay, this is it, git, right? So MobileXTEM is currently being uninstalled. You can see this is my git. Okay, so I want to uninstall git. So I click on this and click on uninstall, right? Okay, so I'm uninstalling. Okay, so let's just give it some time to finish uninstalling. But while that is going on, let's take a look at, we'll still go back here, right? To get access to this virtual machine we created. Okay, so what we want to do now, let's look at a little bit of history, right? Let's look at a little bit of history. Okay, how did Linux came into being? Okay, so let's look at a little bit of history. Okay, so sometime in 1991, okay, there's a guy called Linus Torvalds. Okay, created Linux in 1991. Okay, so that was when Linus Torvalds created Linux. Okay, Linus was studying at University of Helsinki, and he needed to. He was using an operating system, right? Called Minix, okay, and he wanted to do some things, right, on the operating system, and it wasn't possible, right? So Linus made a proposal to Minix, right, about some changes. Okay, this is what I want to achieve, but I can't achieve it. Okay, but the proposal was turned down, right? That, oh no, this is how our system works. So if you can't work with it, there's nothing we can do about it. Okay, so when he looked at that, then he looked at, okay, I can do something, right? I can create something and allow people to do what I'm unable to do on this platform. You can see it didn't just go ahead and created a platform, right? There was a need, right? He wanted to achieve something, right? Using the Minix system, right? But it was not possible. Okay. So that led him to create his own operating system, right? And made it open source. Okay. And made it open source. So take note of the word open source. Okay. Made it free and open source, because that will lead us to what we'll be looking at next. Okay. Looking at the difference between licensed, free, and open source. Okay. So it created something that is open source, such that if anybody has any modification to do on the operating system to make it suit their needs, they can always do it, right? So that is the open source capability, right, of Linux, right? So there are several applications that are also open source, okay? So that is the open source capability. Okay, so it created that as an alternative operating system, right? Okay, so because of this, the open source, okay, because of the fact that it's open source, okay, you see that it quickly gained popularity. People wanted it, right? So obviously, there are several people that have been in Linus Torvalds' situation that didn't go ahead to um, to communicate, or they even communicated and they were also turned down, but they didn't go ahead to make this big difference, right? So he went ahead and made a big difference, right? So he created this open source operating system, right? When it was turned down, right? So now, and if you recall, we've looked at some of these features, right? Because if you are talking about features, we've mentioned some features earlier, but it doesn't harm to mention them again, okay? So some of the features we mentioned is that with Linux, there's multi-user capability, right? We've talked about that earlier, multi-user capability. And there's something very important with Linux, okay? Multi-user, let me just put it there. Okay. There's also something very important with Linux, right? There's also something very important. Okay. So with Linux, Linux is case sensitive. Okay. If you create a user and you call the user Lagbaja, right? And you try accessing the user and you put the name Tamedu, okay? And you try to access and use the name Lagbaja with this in capital letter, right? You see that it won't recognize it because Linux is case sensitive. Okay. So if it is Lagbaja, it is either Lagbaja with lowercase l or Lagbaja with uppercase L. You can't use this and try to access using this. Okay. So Linux is case sensitive. Okay. So you get to see this as we are looking at the commands, right? So in Windows, I can search for something and name it as this and use another case, right? It will work. But with Linux, Linux is case sensitive. So Lagwaja here is a different person from Lagwaja, right? So case sensitivity in Linux is important for us to know. Okay, so another important feature, which we've also mentioned earlier, is the fact that it's open source, right? Right? That was what necessitated the creation of Linux, right? So open source, right? So another important feature we can look at is versatility. We've looked at this before. Versatility, okay? You can use it to complete different tasks, right? Linux can be used for several operations, right? It's versatile, right? So we've also looked at security. This is just like a refresher for us, okay? Like a refresher, Linux is secure. Also use Linux for package management, right? When you look at the different DevOps tools that we want to create, do you want to work with, right? You can manage them on Linux, right? We also talked about something like this earlier, right? Use it for package management, okay? So these are some features of Linux, right? We've also seen the fact that it's very popular and the popularity has resulted in a large community being created for Linux, right? So large community, right? Community, right? So there's a large community of people modifying and dishing it back to us, right? Like all these, we'll get to see Linux distributions. You remember we chose a distribution, but we didn't know what it's all about, okay? So there are different distributions in Linux, okay? So we'll look at the different distributions, okay? So distributions are just different versions created out of the Linux kernel, right? And they've been modified by the creators and being distributed, okay? So those are different distributions, okay? So if you remember, we chose Red Hat when we were setting up our Linux server, right? So that's about that. So looked at case sensitivity and the fact that it has a large community. Okay, so this. So let's see what has happened with what we're working on. We're working on this. Okay, we were trying to uninstall. Okay, we're trying to uninstall some items. Let's see whether they have been uninstalled. Mobile. Oh, it still shows this here. Because it's taking a long time. But anyway, we can continue with something else while the uninstallation continues. Okay. Do you want to allow? Yes. Okay. Okay. I think mobile XTEM is out. Let's just confirm that. Mobile XTEM. Okay, it's gone, right? Mobile XTEM is gone. Let's see Git bash, whether it's still there. Git bash. Git bash is still here. Maybe let's try to uninstall that as well. Okay, so Git bash. Git bash. Okay, so there's, okay, it's still here. So let's just uninstall it. Git bash. Let's right click to uninstall. Then it returns this page, right? And we can right click here as well to uninstall. Okay, uninstall. Then it brings out this. Okay, do you want to allow this app to make changes? I say yes. Okay, so once I do that, are you sure you want to completely remove Git and all its components? I say yes. Okay, it shows that it's uninstalling. Okay, so Git was successfully removed from your computer. You see that? So Git has been removed from my computer. So now, no Git, no Git bash, no Git bash, no mobile XTEM. So let's close this. Let's search mobile Git bash. You can see it's gone. Okay, so that's fine. That's what we want to achieve. So to install mobile XTEM, okay, there are different ways we can go about that. We can just go to you can just search, or we have a blog right on the site where we have several tools and the link to install them. It's good to just have this handy. You come here to blog, click on blog. Okay, if you search, scroll down, popular DevOps tools, okay? You click on this, we'll see different tools and where we can find the tools, okay? So you can scroll down, okay? You can see this is an example of a data center that we're talking about. The data center, you can see different servers and all of that, right? So we can just check this out. Let's see. You can see mobile extend, git bash. We can see different tools. Okay, so mobile extend. To get mobile extend, you can just click on this, right? So here you have different versions. Okay, different versions. You have portable edition. You have installer edition. Okay, so alternatively, okay, instead of going through the blog, you can just search on the internet, mobile extend install, download, or something like this. You can just say mobile extend download. You can just search anything, right? So when you click on, you see, but just for you to know the actual thing you are searching for, you can just click on this, right? Shows you home edition, it shows you professional edition, right? You can just click on download now on the home edition, right? Can click on download now, right? Then it brings this to, right? Which is what you get when you come directly here, right? You can see when you click on the from the blog, it just brings you straight here, right? But here it still took you to a different place, trying to make you buy something, right? So you can just take this, okay? Portable edition. I'm installing it. You see, I clicked on it. It's downloading down here, okay? So it's downloading, okay? So I think it's downloaded completely now, right? Let's see. Okay. Okay, so I believe it's downloaded completely. Open when done. And even open files, show in folder. Okay, you can show it in folder. So a download folder should open. Show in folder. Okay, so you can see there's a version. You can see it's now fully downloaded. Okay, so I click on this, right? Then I click on the application. Okay, says this application may depend on other. I say, okay, that's fine. Extract or run. For applications to run properly, it is recommended that you extract files first. Okay, extract all. Okay, so showing where I want it extracted, and click on extract. Okay, so now it's extracted. Okay, so I can now click on it again. So it's preparing, shows preparing first time setup. Okay. Preparing setup. Okay, so it's opened, right? See, mobile extend is open, right? So this is my mobile extend, right? So these are some sessions I had open in the past while I had the previous installation, right? Which I just uninstalled. So you can click on control in case you want to delete any existing session, okay? And click on control, right? Leave your hand on it and tap, 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 okay? Once you tap it all, you can right click. This is not part of the installation process, okay? This is not part of the installation process. It's just something you might get your hands on, right? Maybe I want to just delete, right? Delete existing sessions, right? So doesn't matter. So now to the work proper, right? We have a server, right? In the remote location, right? But we want to access it from the local computer, right? That's what I want to do. I want to access my server that is in the remote location from the local computer right here. So using MobileXterm, I can achieve this, okay? So to do that, all I need to do is to go to sessions and say new session, okay? This is what you typically have, okay? Now you can see different stuff, right? But what looks familiar? SSH, right? Remember, I want to use this as an SSH client, right? As a tool to access my Elastic computer in the cloud, my EC2 instance, right? Elastic Compute Cloud, okay? So I click on this SSH, okay? It opens this, it says remote host and tells me to specify username. Remember, port 22. I'll get to show you what this port 22 means, okay? Remember when we're creating our instance, it says something like allow access to, let's see, I want to be sure of the actual terminology it's used, okay? So remember when we wanted to create an instance, click this and clicked on launch instance, okay? So somewhere here, right, it says by default, allow XSH traffic from anywhere, right? So if you want SSH traffic from a particular location, you can also select that, right? From my IP, this is my IP address where I am now, right? If I want it to just be from here, I can just select here so that nobody will be able to access, right? Access my server from any other place other than the IP address in my location, okay? So this is a possibility, but you can select from anywhere so that any other person, you might have colleagues that are working, that are working from different parts of the world, right? You want them to get access, right? From anywhere. So it's the same server, right? There could be multi-user. Remember we talked about multi-user capability. So this server we've created we can set up accounts for several users, right? Because that is one of the capabilities. So remember, we saw this allow SSH traffic from anywhere, okay? And we left it the way it was. We didn't uncheck, right? If you remember. So now what this has done is that it opened a port, okay? So learn about security group as we proceed, okay? So because we left that stuff ticked, okay? So if we didn't tick it, okay? If we didn't tick it, there's no way we can get access to that server, okay? So because we ticked it, okay, you can see inbound rules, right? You can see inbound rules. Let's click on this, security group, edit inbound rules, okay? This is just to show us something. It's not something that you should bother about, right? But you need to understand how we got to where we were, okay, and why we are doing, what is the essence of that 22, okay? You can see SSH port is 22, okay? So if you take this away, you can see it has changed, okay? But because we want to SSH into that server, okay, we allowed SSH traffic, okay? And the default port for SSH is 22, okay? So as you are doing this over and over and over and over again, right, you don't need to memorize port 22. You get to know that, oh, SSH is port 22, right? Depending on what you are using, right? So you say HTTP is port 80, right? HTTPS, let's see, as 443, okay? You can see, as you are using these things, you get to know them, right? Right, so you can see SSH, so I didn't do anything, so I don't need to save anything. So just to show you something, okay? So now, what we need to do, we understand why we see 22 there, right? The whole essence of 22, we see it. Okay, so one thing we can do, you can see there's public IP address. Okay, this is what I'll need to access that remote computer, because we are in different VPCs, right? You get to know what VPCs are, but not to worry. Okay, so all we need is this. Okay, copy that, which is, if you click on this, it copies the public IP address, copy it and come and put it in here. Okay, remote host, right? That's remote host, the remote computer. That's what it means. So specify username for Red Hat. Okay, for Red Hat, the username is EC2-user, but there's a way we'll get it, so we don't need to memorize it. Okay, there are different distributions. We'll get to learn about distributions just in a moment after setting this up. Okay, and you see that port 22, right? Because it's SSH port 22. Okay, so you must have this at 22, otherwise you won't connect. Okay, so the next thing we want to do, okay, where did we see this EC2 that? At least we've seen where we saw remote host. Okay, that's the public IP address. Okay, so let's see how we even got all this to avoid confusion in case you are working on your own. EC2, we have one running. Okay, click on this. Okay, you click on this. You click on this to copy. Okay, so we've copied that. So if you click on, let's see, if you click on, let's see, connect. Okay, if you click on connect, you see the user. See, this is the user, EC2-user, right? EC2-user, you see it? Okay, so this is the user. This is where we got that name. Okay, EC2-user. If it's a different distribution, maybe like Ubuntu, we'll get to see that as we proceed in the program. The default user is not EC2-user. If you look at this, EC2-user, okay, you can see that's exactly what we have here. Okay, EC2-user. Okay, so you can come here and now click advanced SSH settings because we want to use our key. Okay, we want to use a key. Okay, click on this checkbox, use private key, and click on this. Okay, if you remember, in our downloads, we have November 20, okay, we have February 2023 DevOps class.pem, right? This is the key for this class that I just created, right? So if I mistakenly select a different key, right? Let's say I mistakenly select this key, right? Can I use the key to my house to open the door to your house? It's not possible, but let's try. Let's try. So if I click on this, you see, trying to access, it tells me, it seems this is the first time to connect to server. The remote identity is done now. Press accept to say you trust, okay? But I can press accept, it will still not connect me. You can see, no supported authentication method. You see the message we got? Server refused our key. Because I'm trying to use the key to my house, the key to your house to open the door in my house. It's not possible, okay? So it's just logical, right? You can see server refused our key. No supported authentication method available, okay? So let's see. Let's close this, right? Let's try again, right? So we click on sessions, right? Now I want to test case sensitivity of Linux, right? Want to talk about case sensitivity of Linux, okay? So if I go back, okay, so we've seen an option that failed because we are trying to use the key to your house to open the door in my house, okay? So it will not work, right? So come here, copy the public IP address, right? I come in here, I put this here. We know it's EC2-user, right? Specify username. I decide to put uppercase C to -user, right? For 22, correct? But this is not correct. This is not the user. It's EC2-user, quite all right. But it's lowercase e. But let's see what happens. I come here because the reason why I'm showing all of this is that these are the possible mistakes that you may encounter while starting, right? So let's make these mistakes together so you can see how it is resolved, okay? So I come here, I use private key, but this time around, I'm using the correct private key, okay? So what this means is that I'm trying to, let's say the door has some face recognition and some key code. I'm trying to use the identity of Tamedun to enter as Lagbaja. No, it's not possible, right? So let's see what happens. Server refuse key, the same issue, right? You see, because you are trying to go in as a different person, okay? So let's see what happens. You can see we've attempted twice, okay? So let's now do it the right way, okay? We are now trying to do it the right way. New session, okay? So SSH, right? We enter this, we specify username, which is EC2-user, okay? Now we specified it correctly. Port is 22. Remember the SSH port, 22, which is opened in the cloud, okay? So we come here, advanced, come here, we are not choosing the wrong key this time, we're choosing the right key. The correct name, the correct key, right? Click on open, then say okay. Yes, are we in? Yes, we are in because we've used the correct key to enter. Okay, I just entered a Linux command, right? Which is clear. Okay, so what I used that command to do was just to clear the screen. Okay, it had some things, then I entered clear. I typed clear. Okay, so what clear does is that it clears the screen. Type clear and press enter. Okay, it clears the screen. Okay, whatever it is you have on the screen, it clears it out. Okay, but if I want to see what I had on the screen before, okay, so we can just come here. Let's navigate and do something else, right? Since we've seen how we can set up a server, right? We've been able to use the SSH clients, right, to get into the server, right? So that's what we've done. Okay. So another one we want to try our hands on is looking at Git bash, right? We talked about Git bash. We've used MobileXtend. We are in, right? We are in the server. Look at us. We are here, right? It's interesting, right? So let's look at how we can use Git bash to get into the server, okay? So if you recall, in my download, let's see my download folder here on my computer, I have this. This is a key, okay? I have this key, okay? Now, that is my download folder, okay? So, but I want to use another platform, right? Another SSH client called Git bash, okay? Git, okay? You can just say Git, okay? Or alternatively, you can see Git downloads. Alternatively, if you go through our blog, you see I've set some things up here. Git bash, okay? If you click on this, it opens here right away, right? You can see this is exactly what we have here, okay? So you can either go to Google or, have a soft landing by going through the blog, just take me straight there, okay? So it will still do the same thing, okay? So see, Git bash supports Windows, Linux, supports all these operating systems, right? Okay, supports all these operating systems, right? So you can see, if you click on this, what do you see? Okay, it says download for Linux and Unix, you see, apt gets install, right? Git, right? So, but we are not going through this, okay? Because the computer I have here that I'm working with is a Windows computer, right? So will it be appropriate for me to use all of this? No, right? But can we still install Git, right? Because when you say Git, it's not just the SSH clients, right? Git can also means something else. We get to learn about Git as we proceed in this program, right? So this Git bash can act as SSH client and also um, a distributed version control system, which we'll learn as we proceed, okay? But now we just want to use it as an SSH client, right? So we won't choose Linux, okay? Although we are learning Linux. But my computer I want to download it on is a Windows computer, right? So I click on Windows, okay? So I can click on this, okay? I downloaded 64 bits for Windows setup. So let's just see how that goes, okay? So while that is downloading, let's take a look at where we stopped here. This fine, this fine. We've been able to achieve what we wanted to achieve with MobileXterm, okay? So we want to achieve the same thing with Git bash, okay? So I click on this, okay? You can see, shows something on my computer. I'm not sure whether you can see it. Do you want to allow this app to make changes to your device? Yes, I do. Okay, so what I want to do is to click on yes. Okay, so once I clicked on that, this page came up. Okay, I can click on next. I can click on next. Already exists. We'd like to install that folder anyway because of the previous installation, right? Yes. So I can click on next. 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 Okay. And just install. Okay. Can just install. Okay, we can see that the installation process is completed. So let's just confirm that. You can see Git bash is already open. So let's click on, let's see Git bash. Let's see that we have Git bash. You can see we now have Git bash. Okay, so if I click on this, it opens up and opens this up for us. Okay, so let me expand the screen. So this is what the Git bash environment looks like, right? So it's looking at my computer, right? Because remember, I downloaded Git bash for Windows, right? So it's looking right here at my computer, and I'll be able to execute commands right here, right now, okay? So now, I'm sure we are familiar with this black screen, right? The IT guys coming to our desk, trying to resolve issues. It looks magical, but it's not as it looks, right? It's very easy, right? So this is actually looking at my computer right now. So let me see, my stuff is in downloads, right? Let's see something, downloads, right? Downloads, okay? So with this CD downloads that are entered here, okay? What I've just done is to change directory from the current location where I am to downloads, okay? And if you recall, I'm sure you are familiar with what my downloads is looking like. This is my downloads. I have this, I have this, I have all of these things here, right? Okay, so this is my Windows computer, right? Downloads, okay? So let's show something, okay? So if I come here and run this command, right? You see, this first command is cd, change directory. Cd, change directory. I was somewhere before, right? To see where I was, okay? I was somewhere before. I said change directory to downloads, and it took me to downloads, right? So if I do ls to list. Ls will list, right? I want to see the contents of downloads, right? We are stylishly going into Linux commands, right? Now I did ls. You can see it's nothing difficult. cd to change directory, okay, to downloads. And now I run ls, and with ls, it shows me DevOps materials, right? This is a directory, a folder, right? As you call it. You can see this is my February 2023 DevOps class, PEM, okay? So the first thing we need to do is to ensure that we find ourselves back in the directory where the key is, and that is what we've been able to achieve, okay? PWD, for example, is print working directory or present working directory. I want to know where I am, gone. You can see I'm inside downloads, right? So you can see that. So that is PWD. You can see we've run 3 commands and they are very easy, right? Easy to remember. Even if you don't remember them, let's just know that you know what you want to do. You can always go on the internet and you find solutions there. Aside that, we'll have several resources on the platform that you can use, right? To get all these things, and they'll stick as you are working with them. That's just the truth, okay? So it's not difficult, okay? So I want to quickly show something before I proceed. Okay, so with this, okay, I wanted to go back to the directory that I was in, right? Remember? Home, right? Remember? Home, right? This sign indicates home, right? User home, okay? So where I was before running this command, okay, I've gone back there, okay? So I want to show us something. Let's say we say cd downloads. Did it take us here? If I do ls, do I see the same thing, right? Talking about case sensitivity. Because this is my Windows computer, you can see I'm able to do some gymnastics with my case, right? I'm able to use lowercase d, and it still took me to exactly the same place, right? Whether downloads or downloads, case or case, it will still obey, right? That's with Windows, right? Because this is my Windows computer. This is where I am. You can see. If I put this side by side, let me look for my, okay. If I put this side by side, you see everything that I have here is exactly what is displayed here. Let's count. You can see DevOps materials, November 2003 DevOps PEM. You can see logo.png. You can see miscellaneous, right? You can see mobile extend portable something that we downloaded now. Mobile extend Git, you can see all of these things that we have here. So now we've achieved what we want to achieve, right? We are right here in the directory that contains our key, okay? So the first step is to move to the directory that contains your key, right? So you want to enter a virtual server, but you need to have the key, okay? To the virtual server where you are, you need to be holding it, okay? So that is what has happened here. We are holding the key, okay? So the easy thing we are going to do, okay? I don't want us to bother our head so much about so many commands for now. We'll get to understand why, what is, okay? This is the server, remember? If you click on connect, okay? It says open an SSH client, right? That's the first step, which is what we've done, which is the git bash. Locate your private key. The key used to launch this instance is February 2023 DevOps class.pem. You can see there's guidance, right? It's telling us what to do step by step, okay? You really don't need to memorize all of this, right? But if somebody that is used to this thing comes on your desk and starts to press all of this ls, cd, all of that, it will look magical, right? But it's very simple, okay? So you can see, locate your private key, okay? It's even telling us the name of the key. And are we able to locate it? see, no, that's git bash. Let's see, are we able to locate it? This is the key, it's right here, right? So now it also goes ahead to tell us to do something else. Let's see that step. Run this command if necessary to ensure that your key is not publicly viewable, okay? Says you should run this command, okay? So you can run this command so that the key is not publicly viewable, okay? Especially when you are using Mac OS, right? But with Windows, I can skip this and it will still work, right? So run this if you want to ensure that the key is not publicly viewable, okay? I can just run this, or I can leave it because I want to be able to demonstrate some things as we proceed in the program, okay? So then I can just go to the next step. I can just copy this, okay? Okay, connect to your server using its public DNS, okay? So you can see this SSH, right? -I. So I can copy this, okay? Copy, okay? I can copy that, okay? So I've copied this, I paste it here, okay? We'll get to understand the different components, okay? So I just copy this and paste here, right? You can see, let's expand it a bit, right? So you can see SSH, right? -I to ignore cases for this key. This is the key. You want to access EC2-user. You don't need to put all this in here. We just copied, right? We followed the steps and copied, okay? So if you just click on enter, as time goes on, you get to understand this string, right? It's not as difficult as it looks, okay? So it's not as difficult as it looks. So you can just say enter. It now says the authenticity of hosts can't be established, okay? This key is not known by any other names. Are you sure you want to continue connecting? Yes, I've not been sure. Okay, I click on type yes. It tells us exactly what to type, okay? Yes is what I want. You can see what has happened, right? If you look at here, you see last login, see? This is the last time I entered something, yes, right? Register this system with red hat inside, so whatever. Create an account, okay. Last login, Saturday, February 4 and 2. That was some minutes ago, right? Okay, I didn't set up the time yet, you can see. So if I check CD downloads, right? I'm out of this area, I'm out of my computer now, right? If I do ls, you see, it shows there's nothing here. This is a blank computer. Now, I want to run a command to know that I'm in the Linux server, right? This command is called uname. We'll go through all these commands, don't worry, right? This is just an introductory class. Okay, uname, it tells us Linux. So we are in our Linux server. So we are no longer at my local computer where I could access all of this. We've moved, okay? We've moved. I'm now in the remote computer, okay? You can see. If I say pwd now, it tells you /home/ec2-user, right? I'm in the home of ec2-user, okay? So if I go to this place as well and say pwd, tell me where I am, okay? Say /home/ec2-user. You can see, tells us where we are, okay? pwd tells us where we are. So let's take a look at this again. You can see the IP address, 172.31.14.225, okay? Ending in 225, starting in 172. So if you come here, so if you come here to our server, remember this EC2 instance, right? If you click on here, remember this IP address, right? It's exactly what we see here, right? So it shows us that we are on that server. So these are different ways to know where you are, okay? It shows us the server that you are in, okay? So now we've been able to access, right, our server using SSH, right? We've been able to access using SSH clients, both Git Bash and Mobile Extend, okay? So that's what we've been able to achieve. So let's take a look at the few more things, right, before we call it a day, okay? So we've looked at, let's quickly take a look at this, okay? Okay, so let's take a look at this. So licensed, okay, versus free versus open source, okay? We've looked at open source a lot, right? So it would be nice to start with open source, right? Since we've looked at it a lot, okay? So open source can be described as a software that has its source code available for people to freely modify and distribute, okay? The source code will be made available. I can look at the source code and tweak it to my requirements, right? That is open source. Okay, so that is open source. The source code can be picked, tweaked to your requirements, and even distributed to others. Okay, that is open source, right? That is open source. Open source. Okay. So when it comes to free, okay, as the name suggests, it is free. Okay, as the name suggests, it is free. You don't pay for it, it's free. Okay, now usually you have free coming with open source, right? Say some applications are free and also open source, right? Free and open source. Okay, so free is free. Is free. Okay. Oh. Free is free. Okay. Open source. Okay. With open source, you can modify. It means the source code is open, right? Open source, right? You can modify the source codes, source codes, and distribute them. Okay, you can modify the source codes and distribute them. Then you said licensed, okay? Licensed, you can't modify licensed, or better still, can just say licensed source, okay? Licensed, okay, you can just say are not free. Just in simple terms, right? Let's not complicate matters. Not free, okay? So free is free. Open source, the source is open. You can modify the source codes. The source codes are open. You can modify them and distribute them accordingly, right? Now, licensed, they are not free, just in simple terms, right? So let's not make things complicated. Right? So when you say free, it's free of charge. Let me just put it that way. So it to be clear, okay? Licensed, not free, okay? So this is fine. So now, before we conclude, okay? Before we conclude, okay, great. So now that we've looked at this, so let's revisit all these other areas in the next session. So that way we can revise what we've done so far. And aside that, we can also take a look at other things in the next session. Thank you for your time. Bye for now. Okay, but before we conclude, do we have any question from anybody? You can unmute your mic.
This is essential.
Oh, okay.
Being the first time into this class, is it possible where in my own leisure time I can like go through all this again?
Okay.
And how do I do it?
Okay, the video will be available on the curriculum, the same place you got the class link, right? You see our in the next couple of minutes, I'll process it and put it there. So you can just click on it and watch the videos.
Okay.
So aside that, we'll also be putting in the quizzes, the flashcards that you can use to study on your own. So that you can test yourself on how far you are with the quizzes, and they will really make good progress with this. I'm positive.
Okay.
Yeah. But so far, how has it been?
Yeah. Well, everything looks like magic to me now, but I know if I stick with it, I'll be fine.
Okay. That's
yeah.
great. That's great.
But I'm following though.
Oh, okay. All right. Thank you. Bye for now.
I'm following it.
Oh, great.
Yeah. Okay.
Bye.